Samuel Grant was a man few would notice at first glance. In his late 60s, he moved with a quiet grace and simplicity that spoke of years well lived. With graying hair tucked under an old baseball cap, he wore his usual attire: worn jeans, a flannel shirt, and a pair of sturdy work boots. To most people, Samuel looked like any ordinary retiree, modest, unassuming, and certainly not the kind of man to turn heads in the flashy showroom of Imperial Motors, the town's most prestigious car dealership. It was a chilly afternoon when Samuel decided to stop by Imperial Motors. After years of loyal service, his old truck was finally showing signs of age. Though it still ran reliably, he'd been thinking about upgrading to something newer, perhaps even something with a few more luxuries. Imperial Motors was known for its selection of top-tier vehicles, and though Samuel typically avoided extravagance, he figured he'd indulge himself this once. When he stepped inside, Samuel paused to take in the showroom. The glossy floors reflected rows of gleaming cars, each one polished to perfection. The salespeople wore tailored suits, their hair slicked back as they moved from one customer to the next with practiced smiles and eager handshakes. The energy was palpable. It was clear that Imperial Motors catered to those who liked to make an entrance. As Samuel wandered past a sleek black sedan, he couldn't help but admire the craftsmanship. He let his hand trail along the smooth curve of the fender, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingertips. But as he moved from car to car, he noticed something odd. No one approached him. Staff members glanced his way but quickly turned their attention back to other customers: young couples in designer clothes and men in sharp suits. To them, Samuel didn't seem like a serious buyer. He wandered the showroom for nearly 20 minutes, patiently waiting for someone to acknowledge him. Salespeople walked past him without so much as a greeting. Every now and then, he'd catch snippets of their conversations, phrases like "big spender" or "top-of-the-line model," and he could see their eager attention directed at those they deemed worthy. Samuel remained calm, though he couldn't deny a slight sting of disappointment. He'd always been the kind of person who treated everyone with respect, whether they wore a suit or overalls. Yet here he was, being overlooked because of his simple appearance. Finally, he spotted a young salesman standing near the entrance, flipping through some papers. Gathering a bit of patience, Samuel approached him with a gentle smile. "Excuse me," Samuel said, keeping his tone polite. "I was hoping to take a look at one of your sedans. Would you have a moment?" The salesman glanced up, his eyes quickly scanning Samuel from head to toe. There was a moment of hesitation, and then, as if deciding Samuel wasn't worth his time, the salesman gave a curt nod and gestured vaguely to the back of the showroom. "Sure, the sedans are over there," he replied flatly, barely making eye contact. "But I'm helping another customer right now. Maybe someone else can assist you in a bit." Without waiting for a response, the young man turned away, directing his attention toward a well-dressed couple who had just walked in. Samuel stood there, stunned. He had expected basic courtesy, at the very least, but instead, he had been dismissed like an inconvenience. A little disheartened but determined, Samuel wandered further into the showroom, stopping in front of a deep blue luxury sedan. The car was beautiful. Its sleek lines and polished finish gleamed under the showroom lights. He imagined himself driving down an open road, the engine humming smoothly. It was a pleasant thought, but as he stood there, admiring the car, the feeling of isolation only grew stronger. He noticed a few salespeople stealing glances his way, their expressions unreadable but somehow unfriendly. One even smirked, sharing a quiet joke with a colleague as he nodded in Samuel's direction. Samuel couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. He'd been around long enough to recognize the signs of disdain. After a few more minutes of waiting and feeling increasingly invisible, Samuel's patience began to wear thin. He looked around the room, spotting the main desk where 3 salesmen stood chatting idly, one of them leaning casually against the counter. Taking a deep breath, he approached them, hoping for a better response. "Hello there," Samuel said, nodding politely. "I'm interested in purchasing one of your vehicles. Could someone assist me?" One of the men behind the counter, a middle-aged salesman with a trimmed mustache, barely looked up. He let out a small sigh and glanced briefly at Samuel before returning to his paperwork. "We're a bit busy at the moment," he said dismissively, his tone bored. Why don't you come back later?" Samuel felt a pang of disappointment that settled deep in his chest. Here he was, ready to spend his hard-earned money, yet treated as though he were a burden simply because he didn't look the part. He'd seen people make snap judgments all his life, but experiencing it firsthand like this was harder than he'd expected. He gave a small nod, keeping his expression calm and neutral, though his heart felt heavy. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of one of the younger salesmen watching him with a faint smirk. The man muttered something under his breath to a colleague, and they both laughed quietly, a sound that followed Samuel as he exited the dealership. In the cool afternoon air, Samuel stood for a moment beside his old truck, his mind racing. The entire experience had left a bitter taste in his mouth, but more than that, it had ignited something he hadn't felt in years. A mixture of frustration, disappointment, and a quiet, simmering resolve. As he drove away from the dealership, he couldn't shake the thought that something needed to change, not just for himself, but for anyone else who might have been treated the same way. That evening, as he sat in the quiet comfort of his home, Samuel made a silent decision. This wasn't over. Not yet. This chapter sets the tone for Samuel's character and the key event that drives him toward change. It introduces the dealership's dismissive atmosphere and foreshadows Samuel's silent resolve to take action. The events of the day lingered with Samuel as he returned home, casting a shadow over his usually serene evening. He settled into his favorite chair by the window, his old truck parked in the driveway where he could see it through the window. The house was quiet, just the way he liked it, but tonight, the silence only seemed to echo the hollow feeling left by his visit to Imperial Motors. Samuel had faced his share of judgment over the years, but it was rare for it to strike this deep. After decades of building a life and a fortune from the ground up, he had become accustomed to being underestimated, usually by those who didn't know him well. But the experience at the dealership wasn't about underestimation. It was about outright dismissal, a reminder that, to some people, appearances were everything. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't wear designer labels or drive a luxury car. Yet, those were the very things that seemed to matter to the people at Imperial Motors. As the evening wore on, Samuel replayed the encounter in his mind, each detail more vivid than before. The cold stares, the chuckles behind his back, and that smug look from the young salesman who had written him off without a second thought. Samuel had always believed in humility, in treating everyone with kindness and respect, regardless of their station in life. It was a principle that had guided him through years of success and setbacks alike. But tonight, he felt that principle challenged, twisted by the judgment he had experienced. Slowly, an idea began to take root. He could feel it growing as he sat there, as persistent as the ticking of the clock on the wall. What if he could teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget? What if he could turn this moment of humiliation into an opportunity to show these people that their way of treating others was flawed, maybe even destructive? Samuel rose from his chair and walked over to his desk, an old oak piece he had inherited from his father, who had been a carpenter. He pulled out a notepad and began writing down names, contacts he hadn't reached out to in years, people he knew from his days in business. He still had ties in various industries, including some in the automotive world. Though he hadn't needed to call on them recently, he knew that his network was as solid as ever. The more he wrote, the more his idea took shape. Imperial Motors was just one dealership in a network owned by a conglomerate that specialized in luxury brands. But Samuel knew enough people with enough leverage to initiate the process of acquiring that specific location. It would require a sizable investment, but that wasn't a problem. In fact, he relished the thought of using his resources in a way that went beyond any business deal he'd made before. This wasn't about profit. It was about principles. The phone calls began early the next morning, just as the sun broke over the horizon. One by one, Samuel contacted old friends and associates, each call adding momentum to his plan. The conversations were short but productive. With his reputation and financial standing, most were more than happy to assist, offering advice and support, or pointing him to the right people who could expedite the acquisition process. By noon, Samuel had received confirmation that his offer had been accepted. It was quicker than he'd expected, but he'd learned that, in business, sometimes things moved faster when they involved the right amount of money and influence. As he signed the final paperwork, Samuel felt a rare satisfaction. It wasn't revenge he was after, not exactly. It was more a sense of justice, a way to show the dealership staff that every person who walked through their doors deserved respect. With the legal formalities completed, Samuel decided to make his return to Imperial Motors that same day. This time, though, he'd be going with a different purpose and a new title. As he drove back to the dealership in his old truck, a feeling of quiet anticipation filled him. He didn't want to humiliate anyone, but he wanted them to understand the impact of their actions, to see the human side of their business beyond luxury sales and superficial judgments. As he pulled up to the dealership, Samuel took a deep breath, steadying himself. He wasn't sure how the staff would react to seeing him again, but it didn't matter. Today, he wasn't just Samuel Grant, the quiet man in a flannel shirt. Today, he was Samuel Grant, the new owner of Imperial Motors. He stepped out of his truck and walked through the glass doors, feeling an odd sense of calm wash over him. The showroom was much as he'd left it the day before, bustling with activity and filled with the same faces he remembered. Salespeople darting between customers, each eager to make their next big sale. A few heads turned when he entered, some people casting him the same dismissive glances as the day before. Samuel spotted the general manager, a man named Ron Albright, speaking with a client near the front desk. Ron was a tall, imposing figure with a sharp suit and a watch that likely cost more than some people's cars. Samuel approached him with a quiet but firm expression. "Mr. Albright?" Samuel said, his voice steady. Ron turned, glancing at Samuel with faint recognition, though it was clear he didn't remember him fully. "Yes? Can I help you with something?" he asked, his tone polite but distant. Samuel extended a hand, offering a set of documents. "Actually, I believe I can help you," he replied, watching as Ron's gaze moved down to the paperwork. "I'm Samuel Grant. I just finalized the purchase of this dealership." The color drained from Ron's face as he skimmed the papers, his hands trembling slightly. A murmur began to ripple through the showroom as other staff members noticed the exchange. The salespeople who had ignored or dismissed Samuel the day before looked on in confusion and, for some, dawning horror. One by one, their eyes widened as they began to understand what was happening. "I came here yesterday as a customer," Samuel began, addressing the entire room with a calm but commanding presence. "I was hoping to make a purchase, but instead of being treated with respect, I was ignored, dismissed, and judged based on my appearance." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Today, I'm here as the new owner of this dealership, and things are going to change." The stunned silence that followed his words was absolute. Faces that had been filled with pride and confidence the day before now looked fearful, unsure. Samuel didn't revel in their discomfort, but he knew it was necessary. It was time to set things right, to ensure that no one else would experience the same treatment he had. Ron swallowed, his gaze shifting from Samuel to the staff around him. "Mr. Grant, I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding," he stammered, trying to regain his composure. We value all our customers here." Samuel met Ron's eyes, his gaze steady. "Respect and kindness aren't just words. They're actions," he replied calmly. "Starting today, those actions will define this dealership." As he looked around the room, he saw the impact of his words reflected in the eyes of the staff. Samuel had come in as a stranger, someone they dismissed without a second thought. But now, he stood before them as their boss, with the power to reshape their future, and the future of Imperial Motors itself. The lesson had only just begun. Samuel's announcement had left the showroom staff in a stunned silence. Some had glanced nervously at each other, others had looked down, as though ashamed. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone present, and though Samuel could see the shock in their faces, he also saw the faint glimmers of understanding and self-reflection. He hoped it was enough to inspire real change, but he wasn't leaving it up to chance. The ride back to his home was filled with a strange sense of satisfaction and a resolute calm. For the first time in years, Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose, a drive to set things right not only for himself, but for anyone who had ever felt disregarded or disrespected because of their appearance. He had the power to make a difference here, to create a place where every person, no matter who they were or how they looked, would be treated with the respect they deserved. Samuel spent that evening laying out a plan. He knew that real change wouldn't happen overnight, but he was determined to set the dealership on a new path, one founded on principles he held dear. To help him navigate this transition, he reached out to some trusted associates, people he had worked with over the years who shared his values and experience. He wanted their input, their guidance, and maybe even their hands in restructuring Imperial Motors. The next morning, Samuel returned to the dealership, a notebook in hand, ready to initiate the changes he envisioned. As he entered, he could feel the lingering tension from the day before. Some staff members looked wary, casting cautious glances his way, while others appeared thoughtful, even remorseful. Samuel approached the front desk, where Ron Albright, the general manager he had dismissed the day before, was standing stiffly. Ron's eyes were tired, and the hint of swagger he'd shown on Samuel's first visit was entirely gone. "Mr. Albright," Samuel greeted him calmly, "I've arranged for you to meet with HR this afternoon to discuss the transition of your role." Ron nodded, his face carefully blank, though his shoulders sagged slightly. Samuel had no intention of humiliating him publicly or treating him with the same disrespect he had shown to Samuel. But he knew that a fresh perspective in leadership would be necessary if the dealership was to transform. After a brief conversation with Ron, Samuel held a meeting with the entire staff. He knew that his words had to be clear, firm, and convey his expectations for what he wanted Imperial Motors to become. "Thank you all for gathering," Samuel began. Looking around the room, "I know that yesterday's news came as a shock to many of you. Change is difficult, especially when it's unexpected. But I want to make one thing clear. I believe in the potential of this dealership, and I believe in each of you. If you're willing to meet me halfway." Some staff members exchanged uncertain glances, but Samuel continued. "Imperial Motors has long prided itself on selling luxury vehicles, but true luxury goes beyond the car you drive or the clothes you wear. True luxury, true value, is found in how we treat each other, in the respect we show to every person who walks through these doors." He let that statement sit for a moment, letting his gaze move from one person to the next, ensuring that each staff member felt included in this new vision. "We will be making some changes here, changes that will be challenging but necessary. First, I will be bringing in a new management team. They'll be working with all of you to improve our customer service standards and to ensure that respect and integrity are the foundation of everything we do. Second, we'll be instituting a new code of conduct, one that emphasizes kindness, empathy, and professionalism above all else." The room remained silent, but Samuel could see some heads nodding. He continued, "For those who are willing to embrace these changes, who want to be part of a dealership that respects every customer, regardless of how they look or dress, I invite you to stay on this journey with me. You'll be given the training, support, and resources to succeed in this new environment." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "For anyone who feels that this isn't the right fit, who doesn't believe in this new direction, I understand. Change isn't for everyone, and I won't hold it against you if you choose to leave. But I assure you, for those who stay, we are going to build something meaningful together." A few staff members looked visibly relieved at his words, while others seemed deep in thought. Samuel hoped that this approach would encourage those who were unsure to give the new direction a chance. After the meeting, Samuel met privately with several staff members who had shown kindness to him during his first visit, particularly a young receptionist named Lily and a mechanic named Carl. Both had treated him with respect and had a natural warmth toward customers, something he intended to reward. "Lily, Carl," Samuel said, nodding to each of them, "I wanted to thank you both for your kindness and professionalism. I know that may sound simple, but it means a lot to me. I want you both to take on more responsibilities here, to be examples for others." Lily, surprised but clearly pleased, smiled shyly. "Thank you, Mr. Grant. I'm grateful for the opportunity." Carl, too, seemed humbled. "I'm just glad to help, sir. I think what you're doing here, it's what this place needs." With these first steps in place, Samuel spent the next several days setting up training sessions focused on customer empathy and active listening. He reached out to a consultant he trusted, arranging workshops to guide the staff in treating every customer with genuine interest and care. These sessions included everything from understanding customer needs to respecting individual stories, no matter how modest or extravagant they appeared. As the training progressed, Samuel saw a transformation begin to take shape. Staff members started to interact with each other and the customers with more warmth and attentiveness. The tension from the past few days eased, replaced by a cautious but hopeful sense of camaraderie. Staff who initially seemed resistant to the changes began to adjust, and those who had already embraced the new direction rose to the occasion, often helping others adapt. Samuel was particularly impressed by a salesman named Alex, who had initially seemed one of the most reluctant. Alex had always prided himself on high sales, often prioritizing the wealthiest clients. But with Samuel's guidance, he began to see value in building relationships with every customer, learning to ask about their needs and offer genuine advice. One afternoon, Samuel noticed Alex helping an elderly couple who had come in looking for a reliable car within their budget. Instead of steering them toward more expensive models, Alex had taken the time to understand their needs and find a modest yet high-quality option. Samuel watched with satisfaction as the couple left with smiles, feeling seen and valued. By the end of the first few weeks, Samuel knew that while there was still work to be done, the foundations were firmly in place. Imperial Motors was beginning to change, slowly shedding its former elitist image and building a reputation for integrity, respect, and kindness. Customers started returning with stories of their own experiences, and word spread of the dealership's new atmosphere. Samuel felt a sense of pride as he looked out over the showroom one evening, watching the staff interact with customers, seeing the genuine connections forming. He realized that what had started as a personal mission had grown into something larger, an opportunity to build a legacy, not just for himself, but for everyone who walked through Imperial Motors' doors. He smiled to himself, knowing the journey was far from over. This was only the beginning. The following weeks at Imperial Motors were nothing short of transformative. With the new training sessions in full swing and a set of principles guiding their operations, the dealership was beginning to take on a new identity. Samuel was often on-site, observing, guiding, and engaging with the staff, ensuring that the changes he had put into place were more than just a temporary shift in attitude. He wanted to embed these values into the very culture of the dealership, making respect and integrity permanent fixtures. One morning, Samuel arrived at the dealership, his notebook in hand, ready for a meeting with the new management team. He had selected people who valued the kind of customer-first approach he wanted to see flourish at Imperial Motors, and they were settling in well. Among the new hires was Sarah Collins, a seasoned manager with a background in customer relations who shared Samuel's vision of an inclusive, respectful environment. She had been recommended by a mutual friend, and from the moment she joined, her dedication and empathy became evident. As Samuel was making his way toward the office, he was approached by Alex, the salesman who had shown signs of positive change since the first days of restructuring. Alex looked nervous, clutching a folder in his hands, but there was a newfound humility in his eyes. "Mr. Grant," Alex began, hesitating slightly, "I wanted to thank you for giving me another chance. I know I didn't start off on the right foot with this new direction, but I'm beginning to understand why it matters." Samuel gave him an encouraging nod. "I appreciate you saying that, Alex. Change is hard, especially when it challenges our habits. But you've been doing well. I've noticed." Alex smiled, the tension easing from his posture. "Thank you, sir. I feel like I'm learning to connect with customers in a way I never thought possible." Samuel watched him go, feeling a quiet satisfaction. It was moments like these that reminded him why he had taken on this challenge in the first place. He continued to his office, where Sarah and a few other managers were waiting for him. "Good morning, everyone," Samuel greeted them as he took his seat at the head of the conference table. "I wanted to check in on how everyone's feeling about the changes so far." Sarah was the first to speak, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I think we're making progress, Mr. Grant. I've noticed the staff becoming more receptive, especially after they see how much the customers appreciate the change in attitude." Another manager, Pete, nodded in agreement. "We're seeing more repeat customers, too. They're starting to talk about Imperial Motors as a place where they feel valued, not just another dealership looking to make a quick sale." Samuel felt a wave of pride. He had always believed that treating people with respect would pay off, but hearing it reflected back to him like this reaffirmed that his mission was on the right track. The meeting continued, with each manager offering updates on their departments. They discussed ways to reinforce the dealership's new values, from customer service protocols to employee recognition programs that highlighted acts of kindness and professionalism. Samuel's vision was coming to life, one small step at a time. After the meeting, Samuel took a walk around the showroom, greeting customers and staff alike, listening to their conversations and watching the staff put their training into practice. As he moved through the aisles, he noticed a familiar face near the back of the showroom. Ethan, the young salesman who had dismissed him on his first visit. Ethan had been one of the more reluctant employees when the new training began, but Samuel had noticed him making efforts to adapt, albeit hesitantly. As Samuel approached, Ethan looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to nervousness. "Mr. Grant," he stammered, straightening his posture. "Good morning, Ethan," Samuel replied calmly, his eyes steady. "How are you finding the new approach to customer service?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably but managed to answer, "It's different. I wasn't sure at first, but I can see why it's important." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Change is difficult, especially when it challenges what we're used to. But I believe it's making all of us better at what we do. Don't you agree?" Ethan hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Yes, sir. I think I'm starting to see that." Samuel smiled, offering him a reassuring nod. "Keep up the good work, Ethan. I'm here if you ever want to talk or need help with anything." As he continued through the showroom, Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The changes he had set in motion were taking hold, and he knew that, with patience and persistence, he could help the staff see the true value of this transformation. But just as Samuel was reveling in the positive shift, Ron Albright, the former general manager whom Samuel had dismissed, entered the showroom. Samuel had arranged for Ron to come in for one last meeting to finalize his transition. Ron was visibly tense, his expression guarded as he walked up to Samuel, holding a set of documents. "Mr. Grant," Ron greeted, his voice subdued, "I've brought the final paperwork for my departure." Samuel nodded, inviting Ron to follow him into his office for a private conversation. Once they were seated, Samuel could see that Ron was grappling with conflicting emotions, a mixture of pride and reluctance. "Ron," Samuel began gently, "I know this wasn't an easy transition for you. You dedicated a lot of time to this dealership, and your experience is valuable." Ron's shoulders slumped slightly, his guarded expression softening. "I know things had to change, Mr. Grant, and I understand why you made the decisions you did. But it's hard to walk away from something you helped build, even if it wasn't perfect." Samuel leaned forward, his gaze compassionate. "I respect everything you contributed here, Ron. The dealership wouldn't be what it is today without your efforts. That's why I want to offer you something." Ron looked at him, surprised. "I want to extend a position to you as a consultant for Imperial Motors," Samuel continued. "You understand the ins and outs of this place, and your experience would be valuable as we continue implementing these changes. You'd be helping to guide the team and advising on operational improvements. It's a different role, but one where your knowledge would make a big impact." Ron's eyes widened, clearly not expecting such an offer. He looked down at the paperwork he'd brought, then back up at Samuel, visibly conflicted. I'm honored, Mr. Grant," Ron said finally, his voice quiet. "Thank you. I'll need some time to think about it, but I appreciate the opportunity." Samuel nodded, understanding. "Take your time, Ron. I know change isn't easy, but I hope you'll consider being part of this new direction. You have a lot to offer." As Ron left the office, Samuel felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing he had extended an olive branch. He believed that everyone deserved a chance to change, even those who had been part of the old culture. Offering Ron a role that could honor his experience while supporting the dealership's new vision was a way to honor that belief. Later that day, as Samuel walked through the showroom once more, he saw Lily, the young receptionist he had promoted, assisting an elderly customer. Her kindness and patience were evident in every gesture, every word, as she guided the customer to the car they were looking for. Watching her, Samuel felt a quiet pride. It was moments like these, small and seemingly simple, that reaffirmed his mission. By the end of the day, Samuel returned to his office, watching as the last few employees closed up the dealership. He knew there were still challenges ahead, that some of the staff might struggle to fully adapt. But he also knew that Imperial Motors was moving in the right direction. Samuel closed his notebook, satisfied that today had been a meaningful step forward. As he turned off the lights, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, but for tonight, he allowed himself a quiet moment of pride. He had set out to make a change, not just for himself, but for everyone who walked through the doors of Imperial Motors. And, slowly but surely, he could see that change taking root. The journey was far from over, but Samuel knew he was on the right path. The changes at Imperial Motors had begun to take root, but not everyone embraced the new direction. For some of the staff, Samuel's approach seemed overly idealistic, a departure from the high-stakes, sales-focused environment they were used to. The tension simmered beneath the surface, and Samuel knew that if the new culture was to survive, he would have to address this head-on. As Samuel made his way to the dealership one crisp morning, he noticed several staff members gathering in quiet, murmured conversations. They fell silent as he passed, offering polite nods but avoiding his eyes. Samuel had learned that some of the most resistant voices belonged to a core group of salespeople, including Ethan and a few others who were wary of the new, customer-focused approach. They felt that the old way, focusing on high-end clients and quick commissions, was more profitable and less complicated. Determined to address these lingering issues, Samuel called a team meeting. He invited every staff member, from the sales team to the service technicians, wanting everyone to hear what he had to say. The group assembled in the main showroom, gathering around in a semicircle as Samuel took his place at the front, his steady gaze meeting each of theirs. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his tone calm but resolute. "I know the last few weeks have been challenging, and I'm aware that some of you are uncertain about the changes we've implemented. That's why I wanted to speak with you all directly." He paused, letting his words sink in, watching the mixture of curiosity, wariness, and even frustration on some of their faces. "Let me be clear," Samuel continued. "Imperial Motors isn't just about selling cars. It's about the experience we create for every person who walks through those doors. Whether they're here to buy our most luxurious model or simply looking for a reliable vehicle, every customer deserves to be treated with respect and dignity." He saw a few skeptical glances exchanged between some of the staff, especially from Ethan and a salesman named Derek, who had been vocal about his disapproval of the changes. Sensing their doubt, Samuel decided to address it directly. "I know some of you believe that focusing on respect and customer experience will hurt our bottom line. That by not prioritizing our wealthiest clients, we might lose sales." He looked at Ethan and Derek, holding their gaze. "But I can assure you, treating every customer well is not just good for the customer, it's good for business. When people feel valued, they come back. They tell their friends. And that's how we build long-term relationships." Derek, clearly frustrated, crossed his arms and spoke up. "With all due respect, Mr. Grant, we're here to sell cars, not make friends. I don't see how catering to every person who walks in here is going to help us meet our targets. The luxury buyers are our real market, aren't they?" The room fell silent, tension thickening in the air. Samuel studied Derek for a moment, considering his words. He understood where Derek was coming from. After all, the dealership's previous model had been built on catering to high-paying clients, and change was difficult. "Derek," Samuel said gently but firmly, "I understand your perspective, and I understand that it's difficult to change the way we've done things for years. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you went above and beyond for a customer, not because of the commission, but because it was simply the right thing to do?" Derek faltered, clearly taken aback. He glanced around, as if searching for support, but found only silence. Finally, he looked down, unable to meet Samuel's steady gaze. Samuel continued, his tone steady. "Our goal here is not just to sell cars, but to make Imperial Motors a place where people feel welcome, respected, and valued. This isn't just about high-end customers. It's about building trust and creating a reputation that speaks for itself." Ethan, who had been quiet until now, shifted uncomfortably and spoke up. "Mr. Grant, I get what you're saying, but it feels risky. We're in a competitive market, and if we don't go after the big clients, someone else will." Samuel nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the concern. "I won't deny that this approach is different. But here's what I've learned over the years, Ethan. People remember how they were treated far longer than they remember what they bought. If we're known as the dealership that treats every customer with genuine respect, we'll gain something far more valuable than a single sale. We'll earn loyalty. He let the words resonate, watching as the staff absorbed his message. Some looked thoughtful, others uncertain. But Samuel could see a shift in a few faces, a glimmer of understanding that maybe, just maybe, this new direction held potential they hadn't seen before. To reinforce his point, Samuel shared a recent story from the showroom. A young family had come in, clearly on a tight budget, looking for a dependable car. They didn't fit the typical profile of a luxury buyer, but one of the newer sales staff, Alex, had taken the time to help them find something within their means. The family left, grateful and deeply appreciative of the care Alex had shown them. A few days later, they referred two other families, both of whom had made purchases. "That's the kind of loyalty I'm talking about," Samuel said, addressing the entire room. "It's not always immediate, and it's not always obvious. But when people feel respected, they don't forget. And that's how we build a reputation that will last." For a moment, no one spoke. Derek shifted, his arms still crossed, but his expression had softened, as if he were considering Samuel's words more deeply. Ethan, too, seemed to be re-evaluating his stance, though he remained hesitant. Samuel decided to end the meeting with a final point. "Change takes time. I'm not expecting perfection overnight, but I am asking for commitment. A commitment to treat every person who walks through those doors as if they're the most important person in the room. If you're willing to embrace this, I promise you'll see the difference it makes, not just for the customers, but for yourselves." He looked around, waiting to see if anyone would respond. Slowly, a few heads nodded, and Samuel felt a small surge of relief. He could see the beginnings of a shift, subtle but significant. As the meeting dispersed, a few staff members stayed behind to speak with him. Alex approached, his expression one of newfound determination. "Mr. Grant, I just wanted to say, I appreciate this direction. I didn't understand it at first, but after seeing the response from customers, I get it. It feels good to help people find something that's right for them, not just what's most expensive." Samuel smiled, clapping Alex on the shoulder. "Thank you, Alex. That's exactly what we're aiming for here. Keep up the good work." One by one, other staff members approached to express their support or to ask questions about how they could better embody the new values Samuel was setting. Even Ethan lingered nearby, watching quietly, as if considering whether he, too, could embrace this shift in perspective. As the last of the staff filed out of the showroom, Samuel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, and he anticipated there would still be challenges. But he also knew that moments like this, when people began to see the value in what they were building together, were worth every effort. Imperial Motors was beginning to find its new identity, one rooted in integrity, respect, and a commitment to treating people right. And Samuel knew that with time and perseverance, this vision could become a reality. As he walked through the now empty showroom, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Change was never easy, but it was always worth it when it meant building something better. And Samuel was willing to fight for that change, not just for himself, but for everyone who walked through those doors. In the days following the team meeting, the changes at Imperial Motors began to take on a life of their own. Staff who had once been skeptical were slowly warming to Samuel's approach, realizing that his vision wasn't just talk. It was reshaping the very essence of the dealership. And although challenges remained, a palpable sense of camaraderie had started to form among the team. They were no longer just colleagues vying for commissions. They were becoming a team united by a shared purpose. One morning, Samuel arrived early to find Lily, the young receptionist he had promoted, setting up a coffee station near the entrance. She had arranged a small table with fresh coffee, tea, and pastries, creating a warm and welcoming area for customers as they entered the showroom. She greeted him with a smile as he walked in. "Good morning, Mr. Grant," she said, her face lighting up. "I thought this might be a nice way to welcome our customers. A little extra touch." Samuel's face broke into a smile. "This is a wonderful idea, Lily. It's exactly the kind of thoughtfulness I hope to see more of around here." As he spoke, he noticed Alex entering the showroom, carrying a box of new brochures he'd designed himself. He had taken the initiative to create materials that highlighted Imperial Motors' commitment to respect and customer care, with testimonials from recent customers and stories of positive experiences. He placed the brochures on a display stand near the coffee station, nodding to Lily. "Great setup, Lily," he said with a grin. "I think this will make a real difference." Seeing these small yet significant changes filled Samuel with pride. The staff were beginning to take ownership of the new vision, going beyond his instructions and making it their own. Imperial Motors was transforming, not just externally, but from the heart. As the morning progressed, customers started arriving, many of them pleasantly surprised by the new atmosphere. Samuel watched from his office, noticing how customers reacted to the warmth and attention they received. He saw Ethan, one of the former skeptics, helping a retired couple who were looking for a reliable car for their cross-country road trips. Ethan, who had once chased only high-end sales, was taking his time, genuinely listening to the couple's needs, guiding them through their options, and sharing his own tips for road trips. At one point, Ethan glanced toward Samuel's office and met his gaze. There was a new expression on his face, one of pride and humility. Samuel nodded, a small gesture of encouragement. Ethan's transformation was one of the most surprising, and Samuel knew that fostering it would be essential to the dealership's future. After helping the couple, Ethan approached Samuel's office and knocked on the door. Samuel gestured for him to come in, welcoming him with a warm smile. "Mr. Grant," Ethan began, a bit shyly, "I just wanted to say thank you. I know I wasn't exactly on board with all of this at first, but I get it now. Helping people like that couple this morning, it felt good. It felt right." Samuel nodded, his voice kind. "I'm glad to hear that, Ethan. Sometimes it takes a while for us to see the value in something new. But you've adapted, and that's what matters. Keep it up." With a grateful smile, Ethan left the office, his posture a little straighter than before. Samuel felt a sense of satisfaction, knowing that Ethan's change in attitude would inspire others on the team. Meanwhile, Sarah, the new manager Samuel had hired, was working on a project to build community connections. She had approached Samuel with the idea of hosting monthly events at the dealership, workshops on car maintenance, road safety seminars, and even sessions for new drivers. These events would be open to the public, a way to engage with the community and position Imperial Motors as more than just a place to buy cars, but a resource for everyone in the area. The first event was scheduled for the following Saturday. Sarah had organized a workshop on basic car maintenance, covering topics like tire changes, fluid checks, and other essential skills. They had partnered with a local charity to provide free resources for attendees, and Carl, the mechanic who had treated Samuel with respect from the beginning, volunteered to lead the session. The event drew in a surprising crowd, with over 50 people from the community attending, many of whom had never been to the dealership before. Carl led the workshop with enthusiasm, engaging the audience with practical demonstrations and answering questions. The staff noticed how people's perceptions of Imperial Motors were shifting. This wasn't just a dealership, it was becoming a trusted part of the community. At the end of the workshop, a woman approached Samuel with her teenage son, who had just gotten his driver's license. She thanked him, expressing her gratitude for hosting such a valuable event. "It's rare to find a business that cares this much about the community," she said, shaking his hand warmly. "You're making a real difference here." Samuel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had always known that respect and kindness were powerful, but seeing the impact on the community, on his staff, and on the customers firsthand brought him an even greater sense of purpose. Over the next few weeks, the dealership continued to host events, each one drawing in more members of the community and reinforcing Imperial Motors' reputation as a welcoming, inclusive place. Customers began leaving positive reviews online, praising the staff for their genuine care and helpfulness. Word spread, and soon, people from neighboring towns started making the trip to Imperial Motors, wanting to experience the new customer-centric environment for themselves. One day, a familiar face walked through the doors, Ron Albright, the former general manager. He had kept in touch with Samuel over the past few weeks, wrestling with Samuel's offer to return as a consultant. Watching the dealership evolve had piqued his curiosity, and he was finally ready to see the changes in person. Samuel greeted Ron warmly, inviting him to take a tour of the newly reformed Imperial Motors. As they walked through the showroom, Ron observed the changes: the coffee station, the community bulletin board with announcements of upcoming events, the relaxed and friendly interactions between staff and customers. "Mr. Grant," Ron said finally, pausing near the entrance, "I have to admit, I wasn't sure about your vision at first, but seeing all of this, it's inspiring. I never thought a dealership could feel like this." Samuel nodded, smiling. "Change is difficult, Ron, but when it's the right change, it creates something stronger, something lasting." Ron looked thoughtful, glancing around at the busy, bustling showroom. "I'd like to accept your offer, Mr. Grant. I'd like to come back as a consultant and help keep this vision alive." Samuel's smile deepened. "Welcome back, Ron. I'm glad to have you on board." With Ron's experience and insight, Samuel knew they could strengthen the foundation of the new Imperial Motors even further. Ron's presence brought a sense of closure to the journey that had begun with Samuel's first visit to the dealership, a journey marked by resilience, transformation, and the determination to make a difference. As the weeks turned into months, Imperial Motors continued to grow, not just in sales but in the loyalty and trust it earned from the community. Customers came not just to buy cars, but to seek advice, attend events, and connect with a staff that had become more like family than salespeople. The dealership had shed its once elitist image and had become a place known for its integrity, respect, and dedication to serving people with kindness. One evening, as Samuel closed up the dealership, he took a moment to look around the now empty showroom. The soft glow of the lights reflected off the cars, and the faint aroma of coffee lingered in the air. It was a far cry from the place he had walked into on that fateful day so many months ago. Imperial Motors had been reborn, not just as a business, but as a place of community, care, and connection. As he locked the doors and stepped out into the cool night air, Samuel felt a sense of peace. He had built a legacy, not one of wealth or material success, but one of respect, humility, and kindness, values that would outlast him and continue to shape the dealership long after he was gone. It was a legacy he could be proud of, and he knew that in this journey, he had left a part of himself in the very heart of Imperial Motors. Months passed, and Imperial Motors thrived under its new philosophy of integrity, respect, and community connection. Samuel's once ambitious vision had become a reality. What had started as a simple stand against mistreatment had transformed the dealership into a model for customer service and genuine care. Imperial Motors had become a place where people from all walks of life felt welcome, where respect wasn't just a promise but a daily practice. One autumn afternoon, Samuel sat in his office, reviewing recent sales reports. He was pleased to see steady growth. Customers had begun traveling from surrounding towns, drawn by the dealership's reputation as a place that treated everyone with equal care. The figures confirmed what Samuel had known all along. Genuine kindness and respect were not just idealistic notions, they were powerful business principles. The success they brought was far richer and more enduring than any quick sale. As he worked, Sarah, the manager who had organized community events, knocked lightly on his door before entering with a smile. "Mr. Grant," she said, holding a small stack of letters, "I thought you'd like to see these. They're letters from some of the customers and community members who've attended our events. A lot of them just wanted to say thank you." Samuel took the letters, glancing through the heartfelt messages. Each letter spoke of a different experience: a single mother who'd attended a car maintenance workshop and felt empowered to care for her vehicle, a family who had found the perfect car with the patient help of Ethan, or a young man who felt encouraged by the dealership's friendly atmosphere on his first car purchase. One by one, these stories painted a picture of a dealership that had become more than just a business. Reading the letters, Samuel felt a surge of pride. These were the real indicators of success, far more valuable than any profit margin. "We're really making a difference," he said to Sarah, his voice warm. "It's more than I ever expected." She nodded, clearly moved by the stories. "You've set an incredible example, Mr. Grant. This place wouldn't be what it is without your vision." Samuel smiled, humbled. "It's all of us working together. You, Alex, Lily, Carl. Everyone here has helped bring this to life." As Sarah left, Samuel thought back on the people who had joined him on this journey. Alex, who had gone from chasing commissions to putting customers first. Lily, who had added those thoughtful touches that warmed the dealership's atmosphere. Carl, whose workshops had empowered the community. And even Ron, the former general manager, who had returned as a consultant and helped guide the dealership with his wealth of experience. Later that week, Ron came by Samuel's office for one of their regular strategy meetings. Over time, Ron had become one of the dealership's most ardent supporters, his initial skepticism replaced by genuine belief in Samuel's vision. "Samuel," Ron began as he sat down, his tone thoughtful, "I've been thinking a lot about what you've built here. This dealership, it's unlike anything I've ever been part of. The reputation we have now, the loyalty people feel, it's because of you." Samuel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Ron, it's all of us. I couldn't have done any of this alone." Ron leaned forward, his expression serious. "Even so, it was your idea. Your heart changed this place. I don't think you realize just how much of a legacy you're creating." The word legacy lingered in Samuel's mind. He had started this journey as a personal mission to correct a wrong, to show the dealership staff that respect was not just a courtesy but a core value. Now, it was so much more than that. Imperial Motors had become a symbol of what a business could achieve when built on integrity and care. Later that month, the dealership hosted an open house event to celebrate their success and invite the community to experience the new Imperial Motors. The team organized live demonstrations of new vehicle features, car maintenance workshops, and a meet and greet with the staff. The event was bustling, the showroom alive with laughter, conversation, and the cheerful hum of families and individuals exploring the cars and chatting with the team. As Samuel moved through the crowd, he greeted familiar faces, customers who had become friends, members of the community who had attended past events, even a few former customers from other dealerships who had heard of Imperial Motors' reputation and had decided to give it a try. Seeing everyone together, Samuel felt that this was more than a business. It was a community center, a place where people came together, shared knowledge, and felt truly welcomed. At one point, he saw Derek, one of the salesmen who had been a vocal critic of the changes. Derek was speaking with a customer, an older gentleman who seemed a little unsure of himself. In the past, Derek might have rushed through the interaction, seeing it as a low-priority sale. But today, Samuel watched as Derek took his time, answering questions patiently, nodding, and even sharing a laugh with the man. When the customer left, he shook Derek's hand warmly, a smile lighting up his face. After the customer walked away, Samuel approached Derek, who looked a bit sheepish but pleased. "Nice work, Derek," Samuel said, a hint of pride in his voice. "I can tell you're connecting with people in a new way." Derek rubbed the back of his neck, nodding. "Yeah, it's different, but it feels good. I used to think it was all about getting the sale, but now I see it's more than that. It's about helping people, making them feel at home. I get it now." Samuel smiled, clapping him on the shoulder. "I'm glad to hear it, Derek. You're part of what makes this place special." As the day wound down, Samuel took a moment to stand back and take it all in. The team, the customers, the atmosphere buzzing with warmth and energy. His vision had not only come to life. It had grown into something even greater than he had imagined. This was no longer just a car dealership. It was a place where people felt seen, heard, and respected. Later that evening, after the open house had ended and the showroom was quiet, Samuel gathered the entire staff together for a brief meeting. He looked around, feeling an overwhelming gratitude for the people who had shared this journey with him. "I want to thank each and every one of you," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "This dealership would not be what it is today without your commitment, your kindness, and your hard work. I know the changes we made were difficult at first, but you believed in this vision, and because of that, we've built something incredible." The team listened, nodding, their faces filled with pride and gratitude. "Every day, we have the chance to make a difference," Samuel continued. "Not just in our customers' lives, but in each other's lives as well. And that, to me, is the true success of Imperial Motors. It's not just about selling cars. It's about creating a place where people feel valued." As the team applauded, Samuel felt a sense of peace. He had come here looking for respect, for a simple change in how he was treated. But in the process, he had found so much more: purpose, connection, and a way to leave a meaningful legacy. After the applause died down, Lily stepped forward, holding a small plaque. "Mr. Grant, we all wanted to give you something to show our appreciation. You brought us together and taught us the power of kindness. Thank you for everything." Samuel took the plaque, his eyes misting as he read the inscription. "In gratitude to Samuel Grant for teaching us the true value of respect and integrity." He looked up, his heart full, and saw the smiles of the team, each of them now fully committed to the vision he had shared. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "This means more to me than I can express." As he left the dealership that evening, the plaque carefully tucked under his arm, Samuel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had created something lasting, something that went beyond sales figures and profit margins. He had left a mark on the world, a legacy that would endure through the kindness and respect practiced every day at Imperial Motors. The night was quiet as he walked to his car, and as he drove home, he knew that his journey had reached a meaningful milestone. But he also knew that the story of Imperial Motors was far from over. It would continue to grow, to evolve, and to impact lives. Each act of kindness, each gesture of respect, a reminder of the vision that had transformed a simple dealership into a place of true value and community. And as Samuel looked up at the stars, he felt at peace, knowing that the legacy he had built was one of humility, compassion, and unwavering respect for all. The transformation at Imperial Motors had become legendary, not only within the community but also throughout the industry. What began as a single dealership's change in culture had turned into a case study in what a business could achieve when it embraced humility, integrity, and respect as its core values. Samuel had never set out to make a big impact. He'd only wanted to correct a wrong and create a place where people were treated fairly. But his vision had grown beyond anything he had imagined. Months turned into a year, and Samuel noticed that the dealership was now thriving in every way possible. Sales had increased, customer loyalty was at an all-time high, and staff turnover had dramatically decreased. Imperial Motors had become a place where people wanted to work and where customers returned, not only for the cars but for the warm, human experience they found there. Samuel had succeeded in making the dealership a beacon of respect and community. But Samuel was now in his 70s, and he knew it was time to start planning for a transition. While he still loved coming to work each day, he wanted to ensure that the values he had instilled would carry on long after he was gone. He wanted Imperial Motors to continue thriving, with or without him. One morning, he called Sarah, the manager who had become a cornerstone of the dealership's operations, into his office. Over the months, Sarah had not only embraced his vision but had also contributed her own ideas, enhancing the dealership's impact and deepening its ties with the community. Samuel had come to trust her as both a manager and a friend, and he knew she had the passion and dedication to continue what they'd built together. "Sarah," Samuel began, looking at her warmly, "I've been thinking about the future of Imperial Motors. I'm not getting any younger, and it's time I start stepping back a bit. I wanted to talk to you about taking over as general manager." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, she looked as if she might protest. "Mr. Grant." "Samuel, I don't know what to say. Are you sure?" Samuel smiled, nodding. "I've never been more certain of anything. You understand this place, Sarah. You've been here through every challenge, every success. I trust you, and I know you'll keep this place on the right path." She looked down, clearly moved, then met his gaze, her eyes shining with gratitude and determination. "Thank you, Samuel. I promise I'll honor everything you've built here. I'll carry forward your vision." "I know you will," Samuel replied, his heart full. "I'll still be around to help during the transition, but I want you to start taking the reins. This is your place now as much as it's mine." With Sarah's role established, Samuel spent the next several months easing her into full leadership. He watched with pride as she stepped into her new position with confidence, guiding the staff, maintaining their standards of respect and kindness, and introducing small improvements that only strengthened the business. The dealership continued to grow, attracting customers who appreciated its reputation as a place that valued people above profit. One afternoon, as Samuel walked through the showroom, he overheard two customers talking near the coffee station. They were longtime patrons, both of whom had bought their cars at Imperial Motors for years. Honestly, "It's just nice to be here," one of them said, smiling as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "It feels like home. You don't find places like this anymore." The other customer nodded. "I've been to other dealerships, but none of them compare. It's rare to find a business where everyone actually cares about you. This place has heart." Samuel couldn't help but smile as he listened. Their words confirmed that the legacy he had hoped to build was real, and it was living in the very atmosphere of the dealership, carried forward by every member of his team. It wasn't just about the cars. It was about the experience, the respect, and the warmth they offered to every single person who walked through the door. With Sarah now fully established as the general manager, Samuel began to visit the dealership less frequently. He found himself spending more time at home, enjoying the quiet moments, reading, or taking long walks around his neighborhood. Though he had always loved his work, he found that he was ready to let go, knowing that what he had built would continue. One evening, he received a call from an industry publication interested in doing a feature on Imperial Motors. They had heard about the dealership's unique culture and wanted to showcase it as an example for others. Samuel agreed to an interview, but he insisted that Sarah join him, feeling it was important for her to share the spotlight. The article, when it was published, was a glowing review of the dealership's transformation. It praised Samuel's leadership and vision, but also highlighted the team's dedication and the sense of family that permeated the business. It became a popular piece, shared widely and even inspiring other dealerships to consider how they might incorporate similar values into their operations. As the years passed, Samuel's visits to Imperial Motors became less frequent, but he remained a beloved figure among the staff and community. Occasionally, he would stop by, catching up with old friends and marveling at the small improvements and touches Sarah had introduced. Each time he walked through the doors, he felt that familiar warmth and knew that the legacy he had built was in good hands. One day, Sarah called him, her voice filled with excitement. "Samuel," she said, "I wanted you to know, we just won an award for outstanding customer service. It's a statewide recognition. The team's so proud, and we all know that it's because of the foundation you set." Samuel felt a surge of pride as he listened. "That's wonderful, Sarah. I'm so proud of all of you. You've made Imperial Motors everything I dreamed it could be, and more." As he hung up the phone, Samuel looked around his quiet home, feeling a deep sense of peace. He had spent his life building something meaningful, not only for himself but for others. Imperial Motors was now a lasting testament to the power of humility, kindness, and respect, a legacy that would live on, even as he stepped further into his retirement. In his final years, Samuel often reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from that first visit to the dealership where he'd been dismissed to the profound transformation he'd inspired. His story had started with a small, personal stand against injustice, but it had grown into something much larger, a lesson in what was possible when people chose to see each other as individuals, with kindness and dignity. One evening, as he watched the sunset from his porch, Samuel felt a quiet satisfaction. His journey was complete, but the impact of his work would continue, rippling through the lives of those who walked through the doors of Imperial Motors, through the kindness shared between staff and customers, and through the story of how one man's resolve had created something timeless. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samuel knew that the legacy he had left behind was not just a dealership but a testament to the power of respect, a simple, yet profound principle that would carry on, touching lives and inspiring others long after he was gone.